Welcome to Curiosity Compass, the channel where curiosity knows no bounds. Get ready to explore the wonders of mysteries, facts, and endless discoveries. Step into the mysteries of ancient wonders, where every carving tells a story waiting to be uncovered. To our incredible Curiosity Compass family, thank you for being part of our journey. Your support and curiosity inspire us to keep exploring the unknown. We couldn't do this without you. Let's continue navigating the wonders of the world together. Are you ready to embark on a journey of curiosity and discovery? Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications to join the adventure.
All right, so get this, we're doing a deep dive into spooky science today. You know, Halloween's coming up, and while everyone loves a good ghost story, right? Turns out a lot of people genuinely believe in ghosts.
Yeah.
And hey, maybe you do too. We're not here to judge. We're here to explore. We've got all these cool sources, articles from Smithsonian Magazine and Discover Magazine, a whole podcast episode about the science of the supernatural, some insights from an expert on the history of ghosts, and even Neil deGrasse Tyson chimes in.
Yeah, it's so interesting how the paranormal just keeps grabbing our attention. You know, what we're going to do today is take those spooky feelings you get, like when you think you see a ghost or feel a presence, and see what science says about them.
Yeah, we're not here to bust myths or tell you what to believe. We're just diving into the science together.
Yeah.
And you know, there is some seriously creepy science out there. Have you ever heard of the fear frequency?
You mean infrasound?
Infrasound, that's it. It's these sound waves below 20 hertz. So they're too low for us to actually hear, but apparently we can still feel them.
And not in a good way either. Research suggests that being exposed to infrasound can trigger all sorts of unsettling feelings, anxiety, dread, even chills down your spine, like your body's picking up on something being off, but you can't figure out what it is.
Which, I mean, that would totally make you think there's a ghost around.
Yeah.
There's this crazy story about this engineer named Vic Tandy, who worked in this lab that everyone thought was haunted, kept seeing this shadowy figure and just feeling super anxious all the time.
Yeah, and it turns out there was this fan in the lab that was emitting infrasound at 19 hertz. And get this, 19 hertz is also the frequency that can make your eyeballs vibrate. So he's basically seeing optical illusions that were caused by sound. And then when they turned the fan off, the creepy feelings and the shadowy figure went away too.
So maybe some ghost sightings are just our eyeballs freaking out. That's wild. Okay, what about EMF meters? You know, ghost hunters are always using those. They measure electromagnetic fields. And some people think that weird EMFs can explain hauntings. What does science have to say about that?
Well, there's this neuroscientist, Michael Persinger, who did these really interesting experiments. He had these helmets that exposed people to weak magnetic fields. And over 80% of the people who tried it said they felt like there was someone else in the room with them.
Wait, so you're saying our brains can basically be tricked into sensing a presence that's not even there?
It seems that way. And it makes you wonder, could some haunted locations like Hampton Court Palace, it's known for its strange EMF readings, could they actually be tapping into something that our brains are misinterpreting? What do you think?
It's definitely making me rethink those ghost hunting shows. But before we go full-on Ghostbuster, don't we also have to think about the power of suggestion? Like if someone tells you a place is haunted, you're probably more likely to think every little noise and shadow is a ghost, right?
Oh, totally. There was this study where people watched this video of someone supposedly bending a key with their mind. The people who were with an actor who said they saw the key bend were more likely to report seeing it bend too. So even if nothing's really happening, our brains can kind of fill in the blanks, especially when we're expecting something spooky to happen.
It's like our brains are these little story-making machines. Okay, let's talk about sleep paralysis. This one's pretty common. You wake up and you can't move and you feel like there's something terrifying in the room with you.
Yeah, it's a truly unsettling experience, and it really shows how our brains can create their own realities. During REM sleep, our bodies are paralyzed naturally, but sometimes that paralysis lingers when we wake up. And the spooky part is the hallucinations people have during sleep paralysis, seeing shadows, feeling a presence, even feeling held down. They're thought to be like leftover dream images that mix with our waking consciousness.
So you're basically half in a dream and half awake, and your brain's just trying to make sense of it all. No wonder people think they've encountered a ghost or even been abducted by aliens.
Right. And the feeling of dread that often comes with sleep paralysis hallucinations just makes them feel even more real. It's not a stretch to see how someone would think they're being held down by an unseen force. And what's interesting is that these experiences are often shaped by cultural beliefs. In some cultures, sleep paralysis is blamed on demons or evil spirits, while in other cultures it's linked to alien abductions.
It's crazy how our cultural background can affect what we see and feel even inside our own minds. This reminds me of a story I heard on This American Life about this family. Let's call them the H family. They were convinced their house was haunted. Footsteps, voices, the whole 9 yards.
It sounds like a classic haunting, but there's a twist, isn't there?
Oh yeah, a big twist. It turned out their furnace was leaking carbon monoxide.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a good reminder that sometimes the simplest explanation is the right one. Carbon monoxide doesn't have a smell or a color, but it can cause hallucinations and anxiety, which people could easily mistake for a ghostly presence.
It's like a spooky science mystery. Okay, now I want to talk about people who use science to investigate the paranormal. There's this guy, Noah Lee, who has this debunk first approach. He uses the scientific method to try to find natural explanations before jumping to supernatural conclusions.
I think Lee's approach is really important because he emphasizes being thorough and unbiased, which are really important when you're dealing with something as subjective as paranormal activity. He focuses on replicability. So if something truly paranormal is happening, you should be able to observe it and document it under controlled conditions.
Like if you can't repeat the experiment and get the same results, then how do you know it's real?
Mm.
This might seem like a totally random jump, but I want to talk about the Fermi paradox for a second. It's this mind-boggling question. If there are billions of stars and potentially millions of habitable planets out there, why haven't we found any alien life yet?
Yeah, it's one of the biggest mysteries in science, and there are so many theories. Some people believe that we're alone in the universe, while others think that advanced civilizations might be intentionally hiding from us.
Whoa, that's kind of creepy. But how does this tie back to what we're talking about with spooky science?
Well, think about it this way. Our understanding of the universe is still pretty limited. Just like we might misinterpret natural events as paranormal activity, we could be missing signs of alien life because we just don't have the technology or understanding to detect it yet.
So what seems impossible or supernatural today could be explained by science tomorrow.
Exactly. And that's what makes exploring both the paranormal and the vastness of space so fascinating.
Okay, let's come back down to Earth for a minute. We've covered a lot here: infrasound EMFs, sleep paralysis, even carbon monoxide poisoning. What stands out to you from all of this?
I think what's really striking is how many of these explanations have to do with our brains trying to make sense of the world. Whether it's infrasound creating optical illusions, or our minds trying to understand dream fragments during sleep paralysis, our brains are constantly working to create a story of reality.
And sometimes those stories lead us straight to the supernatural. But it makes you wonder if what we think is real is just our brains interpreting sensory data. What does that say about the nature of reality itself?
Now, that's a question that's been debated for centuries, but I think it shows just how much we still don't know about consciousness perception and what it really means to exist.
It's like we're only scratching the surface here. There's so much more to discover and talk about, and we're going to do just that in part 2 of this deep dive.
Definitely stay tuned. We've got a lot more spooky science to get into. You know, as we keep going with this spooky science thing, it's important to remember that this fascination with the paranormal, it's not just like a modern thing. It goes way back, even to prehistoric times.
Hold on. You're saying they were like prehistoric ghost hunters?
Yeah.
Do they have cave paintings of like shadowy figures scaring woolly mammoths or something?
Well, we haven't found any cave paintings of ghosts specifically, but there are some archaeological findings that suggest a belief in spirits and the afterlife even back then. Like, think about those burial rituals where they would put objects and offerings with the dead. It seems like they thought those things would be needed in the afterlife.
So even way back then, people were trying to understand death and what might come next. I guess this need to understand the mysteries of existence is just part of being human.
Definitely. And as civilizations develop, their beliefs about the supernatural evolve too, like the ancient Mesopotamians. They had this whole mythology with all kinds of spirits, demons, and ghosts. They even had rituals to try to appease these beings and protect themselves from harm.
It's like the ancient version of those ghost hunting shows we have today. But instead of EMF meters and EVP recorders, they're using incantations and offerings.
Exactly. And then you have the Egyptians, who were totally obsessed with the afterlife. Their elaborate tombs and mummification practices were all about ensuring a smooth transition to the next world. They thought the spirit, or Ka, would keep existing after death and needed a preserved body to come back to.
Yeah, I guess it makes sense. You wouldn't want your spirit wandering around forever with no place to go back to.
Yeah,
And it makes those ancient Egyptian curses even scarier.
for sure. But as we move past the ancient world, It's interesting to see how the idea of ghosts changed in different cultures. Like in ancient China, ancestor worship was a big part of their beliefs. They thought the spirits of their ancestors could affect their lives for good or bad.
So it's like having a whole team of invisible family members cheering you on or maybe playing a few pranks on you sometimes.
That's a great way to put it. And in the Americas, indigenous cultures had their own unique views on the spirit world. They often included animal spirits, nature spirits, and ancestral spirits in their beliefs.
It's amazing to think about how these beliefs have been passed down through generations and still influence us today. It's not just about ghosts. It's like a whole web of supernatural beings woven into human history and culture.
Exactly. And those threads keep going through history. Think about the Victorian era. They were so proper on the surface, but underneath they were fascinated by death and the afterlife. Maybe it was because so many people were dying back then, or maybe because of the rise of spiritualism.
The Victorians, always so into the macabre. I've read about those elaborate morning rituals they had and how they tried to talk to the dead through seances.
Yeah, seances were super popular back then, with mediums saying they could channel messages from the spirit world. And then there was spirit photography, where they supposedly captured images of ghosts. It's like they were trying to use technology to connect the living and the dead.
It seems like they were looking for comfort and connection in a world where death was so common. It makes you wonder if this fascination with the paranormal is a way for us to deal with the unknown and the things we're afraid of.
That's a really interesting thought. And even though those Victorian seances might seem like something from the past, belief in ghosts and spirits is still pretty common today. Studies show that a lot of people around the world believe in some form of the paranormal.
It's like no matter how much science progresses, there's still this part of us that's drawn to the mysteries of the unexplained.
Totally. But here's the thing. That doesn't mean we should forget about critical thinking or scientific inquiry. As we've been talking about, a lot of supposed paranormal experiences can be explained by natural phenomena, psychological factors, or even just misinterpretations.
So it's not about telling people who believe in ghosts or the supernatural that they're wrong, but about encouraging healthy skepticism and being open to other explanations.
Exactly. It's about being open-minded, but also using critical thinking. And that takes us back to what we talked about earlier with scientific skepticism and using the scientific method to investigate paranormal claims. You remember Noah Lee, the scientist who tries to debunk things first?
All right, the paranormal investigator who's like Sherlock Holmes, he's all about finding those natural explanations and testing them really thoroughly. It's so cool because it reminds us that even the most supernatural seeming things can often be explained by science.
And that's not to say that we can't explain everything or that there's no room for mystery or wonder, but it does mean that we should try to approach the unexplained with a critical mind and look at the evidence.
It's like solving a puzzle. You find the clues, look at the evidence, and see where it takes you. Sometimes the answer is simpler than we thought, but sometimes it leads to even more questions. And that's what makes exploring this spooky science so interesting. It's a journey of discovery that makes us question what we think we know and pushes the boundaries of what we understand.
And who knows? Maybe someday science will find evidence that proves ghosts or other paranormal things exist. But until then, we'll keep exploring this fascinating mix of science and the supernatural, trying to figure out what's really spooky and what science can explain.
It's a deep dive that will definitely keep us on the edge of our seats. Speaking of spooky, that story in the Discover magazine article about the paranormal investigator who was pushed twice with nothing around, even after they reviewed all the footage and data, that one really freaked me out. It makes you wonder if there's more to the universe than we can see or measure with our instruments.
It definitely does, and that brings us back to that sense of wonder and the limits of what we know. The universe is huge and full of mysteries, and maybe some things are beyond what our current science can explain. It's kind of humbling to think about how much we still don't know.
Right. Imagine if future generations have technology that can perceive dimensions or energies that we can't even detect right now. What we think of as paranormal today could be totally normal science in the future.
Exactly. What we understand about science is always growing. What seemed impossible or supernatural in the past can be explained as we learn more. Like, think about germs. Before we knew about microorganisms, people thought illnesses were caused by curses, evil spirits, or imbalances in the body.
It's amazing how our perspective changes as we make new discoveries. Imagine trying to explain bacteria to someone from the Middle Ages. They'd probably think you were some kind of wizard making up invisible creatures.
And maybe that's how future generations will look at how we try to explain ghosts or other paranormal things. Maybe we just don't have the right tools or ideas to understand what's really happening.
It's like that famous quote by Arthur C. Clarke. Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. What seems like magic today could be normal technology tomorrow.
A perfect example. And it's that mix of science mystery and the possibility of new discoveries that keeps us so interested in the paranormal. It's about being curious, asking questions, and looking at the world with a sense of wonder, whether we're investigating a haunted house or thinking about how big the universe is.
Well said. So to wrap up our deep dive, we want to leave you with this thought to think about. If what we think is real is shaped by our senses and our brains, what does that mean about truth? Is truth objective and outside of us? Or is it something our minds create, like some philosophers say?
That's a question that has confused thinkers for a long time, and there's no easy answer. But maybe as we continue to explore the universe and learn more about consciousness, we'll get closer to understanding the connection between our minds, our perceptions, and what reality actually is.
It's a journey that's sure to be full of surprises, challenges, and maybe even some spooky experiences along the way. So stay curious, keep thinking critically, and never lose your sense of wonder.
Because who knows what amazing discoveries are waiting for us in the world of the unexplained.
It's crazy, right? We've been talking about all this spooky science.
Yeah.
But I'm starting to think that what's really interesting is how much what we understand about the world, even the paranormal stuff, depends on the technology we have.
Yeah.
Like what we can't explain today might be totally clear if we have the right tools in the future.
That's so true. Think about it. We used to think illness was caused by evil spirits. Now we know about all those tiny bacteria and viruses. What seemed supernatural back then is just normal science now.
Yeah. So maybe all those unexplained things, those spooky moments that freak us out, they're just waiting for the right technology to come along and explain them. Imagine if we could invent some kind of device that could actually detect those energy fields that some people believe ghosts are made of.
Right. That would be a game changer. We could actually measure and study these things. Maybe even figure out how they work and how they affect the world. What seems like a ghost sighting now could be a huge scientific discovery in the future.
It's like our senses are holding us back. We can only see and hear a small part of the world, like the electromagnetic spectrum. What if ghosts or spirits exist in some frequency range that we can't even detect yet?
I like that idea. It goes back to that Arthur C. Clarke quote about advanced technology being indistinguishable from magic. What if paranormal stuff is just a kind of energy or matter that we haven't figured out how to see or measure yet?
I can just picture some future historian watching our ghost hunting shows and thinking our methods were so old-fashioned.
Totally. Like, they used flashlights and audio recorders to look for interdimensional beings? How cute!
But really, it makes you think about how what we consider true is always changing. Something we think is impossible today might be proven true tomorrow just because of new discoveries and better technology.
Definitely. And that's what makes exploring these things so exciting. It's about being curious, questioning what we think we know, and being open to the idea that there's way more to the universe than we realize.
It's about embracing the mystery, even while we're trying to solve it. And maybe the things that scare us the most are the very things that could lead to the biggest discoveries.
That's a great way to put it. So as we wrap up our deep dive into spooky science, we want to leave you with this thought. Don't be afraid to ask questions, challenge what you think you know, and be open to new ideas. The world is full of amazing and mysterious things, and there's always something new to learn, even in the darkest corners.
Thanks for joining us on this awesome journey into the science of the spooky Falmer. We'll see you next time for another deep dive into something fascinating.